Let me tell you something about schools. During the day, they're loud. They are full of life. You hear kids shouting, lockers slamming, teachers talking. It's chaotic. But at night, a school is a completely different place. It is like a tomb. I worked as a janitor at Northwood High School for 5 years. It was an old building, built sometime back in the 1960s. It had those long, wide hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. The floors were checkered tile, and at night, when the lights were dimmed, the wax on the floor would reflect the exit signs like pools of red water. I actually liked the job at first. I liked the quiet. My shift usually ended at 11 p.m. I would put on my headphones, listen to music, and just clean. It was peaceful. But there was always one part of the school I didn't like: the second floor, specifically the west hallway. I don't know why. The air just felt heavier up there. It was always a few degrees colder than the rest of the building. The lights up there hummed a little louder. It was just uncomfortable. I usually saved that hallway for last, just so I could get it over with and go home. But one Friday night, I wish I had never gone up there at all. It was a Friday in late November. The students had left for Thanksgiving break, so the school was even emptier than usual. The teachers had all gone home early. It was just me, my mop bucket, and the silence. I finished the first floor around 10:15 p.m. I took the freight elevator up to the second floor. When the elevator doors opened, I was hit with that cold air I told you about. The hallway was dark. We were trying to save electricity, so only the emergency security lights were on. They cast these long, creepy shadows against the rows of metal lockers. I started my routine. I had to check every classroom door to make sure it was locked. I had to check the bathrooms. And finally, I had to walk down the row of lockers to make sure none were left open. Sometimes kids leave them open, and if a fire door blows open, the draft can slam the lockers all night long and set off the glass break alarms. So I had to check them. I was walking down the west hallway. My boots squeaked on the floor. Squeak, step, squeak, step. I checked the doors. Locked, locked, locked. Everything was normal. I got to the middle of the hallway. This is where the old lockers were. They were painted a dark, ugly green color. I stopped to adjust my belt, and that is when I heard it. Click. It was a small sound, sharp, metallic. It sounded exactly like a combination lock spinning and stopping. I stood perfectly still. I held my breath. I thought maybe it was just the building settling. Old pipes make noises, old metal expands and contracts. I waited 10 seconds. Nothing. I called out, "Hello?" My voice echoed down the hall. No answer. I shook my head. You start hearing things when you work alone for too long. I kept walking. But then I saw it. About 20 feet ahead of me, on the left side, one locker door was slightly ajar. Just a crack, maybe an inch. I walked up to it. It was locker 204. Now, I knew the school roster pretty well. The janitors get a list of which lockers are assigned to which students in case we need to cut a lock for them. I knew for a fact that locker 204 was unassigned this year. It had a broken shelf inside, so the administration marked it as out of order. It was supposed to be empty. It was supposed to be locked. I stood in front of it. I shined my flashlight at the crack. I didn't see anything, just darkness inside. I reached out with my hand. The metal was freezing cold. I pushed the door shut. Clang. It latched. I gave the handle a tug to make sure it was locked. It held firm. I whispered to myself, just a broken latch. I turned around. I started walking back toward my cart, which was near the elevator. I just wanted to finish my shift. I looked at my watch. 10:45 p.m. 15 minutes and I could leave. I took about 5 steps away. Click, click, click. The sound stopped me dead in my tracks. This wasn't just settling noise. It was fast. It was the sound of a dial being spun aggressively. Click, 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 click. Then, the sound of a metal latch lifting. Clack. And then, the slow screech of a metal hinge opening. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. Run to the elevator. Run to the stairs. Just run. But I couldn't. I had to know. I turned slowly. Locker 204 was open. It wasn't just cracked open this time. It was wide open. The door was standing at a 90-degree angle. I shined my flashlight down the hall. The beam shook because my hands were trembling. The light hit the locker. At first, I thought it was just a jacket, a black bundle of clothes stuffed in the bottom. But then, the bundle moved. I took a step back. I shouted, "Hey, school's closed! Come out of there!" I thought it was a student prank. I really hoped it was a student prank. The bundle shifted. It uncurled. It wasn't a jacket. It was skin, pale grayish skin. And then a face turned to look at me from inside the narrow metal box. I will never forget that face. It was too big for the locker. It looked like a grown man had folded himself, breaking his own bones just to fit in that tiny space. His knees were pressed against his ears. His arms were wrapped around his legs like a spider. But the eyes were wide open. They were completely white. No pupils, just white orbs reflecting my flashlight beam. He didn't blink. He just stared at me from the darkness of the locker. I couldn't breathe. My throat closed up. The thing in the locker opened its mouth. It didn't speak. It just let out a long, dry exhale, like the sound of air leaving a tire. And then, with speed that shouldn't be possible, a hand shot out and grabbed the inside of the locker door. The fingers were long, dirty. The nails were black and broken. Slam! The door slammed with a force that shook the entire row of lockers. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. I didn't investigate. I didn't check the handle. I ran. I dropped my flashlight. I didn't care. I sprinted down the hall, my boots slamming against the floor. I didn't wait for the elevator. I threw open the stairwell door and practically fell down the stairs. I ran out the back exit, setting off the fire alarm. The sirens started blaring into the night. I didn't stop until I was in my car, with the doors locked, speeding out of the parking lot. I called the police from a gas station 3 miles away. When the police arrived, they searched the school. They had dogs. They had guns drawn. I waited outside, shivering, even though the heat in my car was on full blast. The police came out an hour later. The officer looked annoyed. He said, "There's nobody in there, son. We checked the whole floor. It's empty." I stammered, "Locker 204. Did you check locker 204? The officer sighed. "We checked all of them. They're all empty." I had to see. I had to prove I wasn't crazy. The next Monday, I went into the principal's office. I told him I needed to show him something. He was angry about the fire alarm, but he agreed to come with me. We walked up to the second floor. It was daylight now. Students were walking around. It felt safer. We walked to locker 204. It was locked. I said, "Open it, please." The principal rolled his eyes, took out his master key, and unlocked it. He swung the door open. It was empty. No man, no monster, no broken bones. The principal looked at me and said, "See, nothing. You probably fell asleep and had a nightmare." He started to close the door. "Wait," I said. I pointed to the inside of the door. The metal was painted that ugly green color, but the paint was scratched. Deep, jagged scratches were carved into the metal. They were fresh. The silver metal underneath was shining. It looked like someone had been scratching at the door with their fingernails, desperately. But there were words.
Scratched crudely into the metal, right at eye level, were 3 words. I see you. The principal went quiet. He saw it too. He ran his finger over the scratches. He got a metal splinter in his finger. That's how deep they were. I handed in my keys that afternoon. I never went back for my last paycheck. I work at a landscaping company now. I work outside, under the sun. I don't like being inside big buildings anymore. But sometimes, when I'm at the gym or at the grocery store, I'll hear it, that sound. Click, click, click. And I have to leave, because I know that whatever was in that locker, it wasn't a student, and it wasn't stuck. It was hiding, and now it knows what I look like.
I used to love my job. I was a high school English teacher for 10 years, but I quit 3 months ago, and I haven't stepped foot in a classroom since. It happened in mid-October. It was grading season, and I was buried under a mountain of essays. I decided to stay late at the school to get some work done without the distractions of home. It was a stormy night. The rain was hammering against the classroom windows, making the whole room feel like it was underwater. By 8 p.m., the janitors had finished their rounds and left. I was the only person in the building. I had the master key, so I wasn't worried about getting locked out. I was sitting at my desk, grading a paper, when the power flickered. The lights buzzed, dimmed, and then popped back on. I sighed. This school was old. The wiring was terrible. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:45 p.m. I decided to finish one last stack of papers and then go home. Then, the intercom system turned on. It started with a high-pitched squeal of feedback that made me cover my ears. Then static. And then a voice. It wasn't the principal. It wasn't the secretary. It was a child's voice, a little girl. "Teacher?" she said. Her voice echoed through the empty school speakers. "Teacher, can I come in?" My blood ran cold. The PA system can only be accessed from the main office. The main office was on the other side of the building, and it was locked. I stood up. I walked to the door of my classroom and looked out into the hallway. It was pitch black. The emergency lights cast long red shadows on the lockers. "Is anyone there?" I shouted. The intercom clicked on again. "Teacher, I'm cold." The voice sounded closer this time, not from the speakers, but from the hallway speakers. I went back into my classroom and locked the door. I turned off the lights. I didn't want whoever was out there to know which room I was in. I sat under my desk, holding my breath. Then I heard it. Slap, slap, slap. It was the sound of wet, bare feet hitting the tile floor. They were coming from the far end of the hallway. They were slow, deliberate. Slap, slap, slap. I grabbed my phone to call the police. No signal. The storm must have knocked out a tower nearby. I was trapped. The footsteps stopped. I listened. The silence was heavy. The only sound was the rain hitting the window. Then the intercom clicked on for the 3rd time. "I know where you are," the little girl's voice giggled. But it wasn't a cute giggle. It was deep, distorted, like a recording being played too slow. Then a loud bang on my classroom door. I covered my mouth to stop a scream. The door handle jiggled violently, up and down, up and down. "Open the door, teacher," the voice said. It was coming from right outside the door now. "I did my homework. I want to show you." I saw the shadow of feet under the crack of the door. But they weren't human feet. In the dim light from the hallway, I could see that the feet were facing backwards.
The heels were pointing toward the door, and the toes were pointing toward the hallway. Whatever was standing there, its legs were broken or twisted around. "Go away!" I yelled. I couldn't help it. The jiggling stopped instantly. The shadow under the door didn't move. "Okay," the voice whispered. "I'll just wait." Then a sound I will never forget. The sound of fingernails scratching against the wood of the door. Slow, rhythmic. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It went on for hours. I sat under that desk, crying silently, clutching my phone, praying for the signal to come back. The scratching never stopped. It just moved. Sometimes it was at the bottom of the door. Sometimes it was at the top, like the thing was climbing the frame. Around 4 a.m., the scratching stopped. The shadow under the door moved away. The wet footsteps slapped down the hallway, fading into the distance. I didn't move. I stayed under that desk until the sun came up. When the morning janitor unlocked the front door at 6 a.m., I ran out of the room. I was hysterical. I told him everything. I told him someone broke in. I told him about the little girl. We went to the main office to check the security cameras. We watched the footage from the hallway outside my classroom. At 9:45 p.m., the lights flickered. Then, for 6 hours, nothing. The hallway was empty. There was no little girl. There was no monster. But then, the janitor zoomed in on the door to my classroom. The door was covered in scratches, deep gouges in the wood. And the motion sensor light in the hallway had been triggered. It was turning on and off all night, as if something was standing there, something the camera couldn't see. But the worst part, we checked the main office, the room where the intercom microphone is. The door was still locked. The alarm was still set. But on the desk, right next to the microphone, was a pile of wet, muddy leaves and a single sheet of notebook paper. On the paper, written in red crayon, were the words, "I'll see you in class tomorrow." I packed my things that morning. I never went back.
I was on the swim team in high school. I spent a lot of time in the water. Our school had an old indoor pool. It was in a separate building. It always smelled like strong chemicals. The air was always heavy and wet. This happened in my last year of school. It was a Thursday night. I realized I had left my phone in the locker room. My dad drove me back to the school. He waited in the car. I had a key card because I was the team captain. I opened the door. It clicked. As soon as I stepped inside, it was very quiet. If you have ever been in an indoor pool alone, you know it is spooky. The water filters make a low humming sound. The pipes make noise. Every sound echoes off the walls. I walked into the locker room. I found my phone on the bench. I grabbed it and turned to leave. That is when I heard it. Splash. It was the sound of someone diving into the water. I stopped. The pool was supposed to be locked. The coach went home hours ago. I walked to the door that leads to the pool deck. It had a small glass window. I looked through it. All the lights were off. The only light came from the red exit signs. The water looked black. But the water was moving. In lane number 4, red in the middle, someone was swimming. They were swimming very smoothly, but they were completely silent. They didn't make a splash. They just cut through the water. I watched them reach the wall. Usually, a swimmer turns around, or they lift their head for air. This person didn't do that. They reached the wall, and they just stayed there, face down in the water. They didn't move. I waited. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. They didn't come up for air. They just floated there. "Hey," I shouted through the door, "the pool is closed." The figure didn't move. I opened the door. The smell of chlorine was very strong. It burned my nose. "Hey," I yelled again, "you need to leave." Slowly, the figure let go of the wall. Then they sank. They didn't swim down. They just sank straight to the bottom of the deep end, like a heavy rock. I ran to the edge of the pool. I thought someone was drowning. I took out my phone to use the flashlight. I shined the light into the water. It was 12 feet deep. At the bottom, I saw the figure. They were standing on the bottom of the pool, not floating, standing. Their feet were flat on the floor. They were wearing a red swimsuit. Their skin was very pale. I could see the blue veins under their skin. Their hair was floating around their head like seaweed. But the worst part was the face. They didn't have eyes. Where the eyes should be, the skin was just smooth. And their mouth was open, wide open. It looked like they were screaming, but no bubbles came out. They were sucking the water in. I stepped back in fear. I dropped my phone. It fell into the water with a splash. The light from my phone sank to the bottom. It landed right next to the creature's feet. The light showed me the creature's legs. They were broken. The knees were bent backward. Suddenly, the thing bent its knees. It looked like it was ready to jump. Whoosh! It shot up from the bottom of the pool. It moved faster than anything should move in water. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. I slipped on the wet floor, but I got up fast. I ran through the locker room doors. I ran out into the cold night air. I jumped into my dad's car and locked the door. "You okay?" he asked. "You look pale." "Just go," I said. "Please drive." As we drove away, I looked back at the pool building. Through the glass doors, I saw something. A wet handprint was pressed against the glass from the inside. It was sliding down the glass, and standing just behind the glass was a dark figure, dripping wet. The next day, I told the coach I lost my phone. He drained the pool a week later. They found my phone at the bottom, but they found something else too. Stuck in the drain was a fingernail. It was huge. It was too big for a human hand. And scratched into the tiles at the bottom of the pool were 4 words. "I like it down here." I quit the team. I haven't swam since.